Good evening and welcome to our fifth in our series of conversations. Tonight we have Abby.
Hello.
Hi, Abby. Unfortunately, Caroline can't be with us this evening, and hopefully Sharon will be able to join us a bit later. What's your week been like, considering we've had in all of the parts of the United Kingdom restrictions lifted on the lockdown, though in England they're a bit further ahead than they are in the other three countries. So how have you tested the atmosphere?
So, well, this week, obviously, schools have gone back. I know they haven't gone back in Scotland at the moment and various other parts. I know there's even parts of England, actually, where councils have decided that they're not going to go back yet. But lots of children have been heading back to school. Lots of my teacher friends have been heading back to school as well. And my little boy's heading back to nursery tomorrow as well. So all these children are sort of heading back into school and teachers are heading back into school. And I know a couple of weeks ago we talked about heading back to work and how to manage anxiety and thinking around that. But I suppose for me, it got me thinking this week about what about the children? You know, are children going to be struggling with this as well? And what can we do either as parents or teachers or, you know, practitioners to support children that are going back into school as well? Because from nursery, early years, year one, year six, it doesn't matter what age they are, and even if they're not back at school yet, children at home whose siblings perhaps have gone to school are all going to be starting to think about going back to school, whether that's positively or anxiously. So yeah, I thought it would be good to address that this week.
And it's really interesting because I've been looking at some information that's come from other countries where they've been where their children have gone back over the last few weeks. Places like Norway and Denmark, Italy. There doesn't seem to have been much of a problem for a lot of the children. They're a bit apprehensive for a little while on the first day, but then again, they very often are on the first day of a new term anyway. But once they get sort of settled in and they've seen what's what, they're just off happy to be with their friends. I think, though, there are some children that are a bit anxious, but I don't know what you think about this, Abby, and I know we've probably touched on it before, but that's probably a reflection more on their parents than it is on the actual children, where the anxiety comes from. I would think that maybe if you have a very anxious parent, then the children really pick up on that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think if you as a parent have been sort of talking about, oh, I'm really worried about you going back, you need to stay away from people, you need to make sure you're washing your hands, you need to keep your distance, don't let anybody come too close to you. If you're feeling anxious about it and you're expressing your worries and passing those on, then of course you're going to be making your children feel anxious as well. You know, they might be feeling anxious anyway because of things they've seen on the news, but you know, I think you've got to be really careful how you're talking to your children and be careful about passing your fears and anxieties onto them, especially if it's not based on fact. If it's just that you're feeling anxious because you've built up something, or you've seen something on Facebook, or back to that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, check the facts, look at other countries. Actually, across the world there haven't been spikes in the coronavirus because children have gone back to school. And most countries, including England, for the feedback so far, actually, going back to school has been really well received by the children. They've been really happy to go back. But I think from a parent point of view, I think lots of parents are worrying about how their children are going to cope, whether they're going to be intimidated by the new system, whether they're going to be frightened. But those are parents' worries, not necessarily the children's worries. And I think it's about making a really clear distinction. Yes, you might be worried about those things, but do you know them for sure? Do you know that your child's not going to cope? Actually, maybe they're really looking forward to going back, even though they're going to be at a desk on their own. So just question your own thoughts a little bit before you talk to your child about those, or certainly before you pass them on. Is it helpful is it necessary, are the two things you need to ask. Is it helpful to your child, and is it necessary to be passing on that information? Is it just going to make them more anxious?
Yeah, and I think also not only just with parents thinking like that, with a lot of businesses opening up as well now, gradually opening up. I understand quite a lot of staff are quite nervous about going back because they don't know what the situation will be. Measures are being put into place. Also, there's the added problem of will they have a job ultimately to go back to, or will it be a short term, that sort of thing. And one of the key factors there is actually the trust in the organization, the trust in the management, that they are actually working for the well-being of the staff, and that they have put things in place. But one of the best ways that workers can feel trust in the management is if the management actually take the employees along with them, to ask for suggestions, go along and say, look, these are what we're wanting to do. What are your thoughts on it? To involve people, then it builds up a lot more trust. It also means that they feel part of things, and they sort of buy into it in a sense. And of course, coming back to the school situation, we have the employees, the teachers. And I was reading a statistic today, surprising in many ways, but it was up to about 20% of schools haven't necessarily involved their staff, whether it be the teaching staff or the support staff, in what they're coming back to or what they did come back to. So that's just going to heighten any sort of anxiety. Yeah, I was actually speaking to a teacher in Scotland the other day, that they were worried because of that. It was this sort of fear of the unknown. And of course, if you're not sure what's going to happen, or you're going to build up anxiety, because it's then you build up the anxiety because it gets worse.
It's your imagination, isn't it? Your imagination kicks in, and let's face it, most of the time when we're imagining things, it's never the best case scenario. It's usually the worst case scenario. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the reality. That's, again, something really important. And practice, a really good thing to do is practice imagining it going really well. Now, that's not to say that you can, it's going to go to plan. Actually, it will help you to manage your feelings and reduce anxiety if you plan things going well. And what you were just saying about getting the staff involved, actually, as much as there's guidelines to put in place, and that are already going to be in place by the time the children get there, it might be really helpful to get the children involved with coming up with some ideas as well, and make them feel involved, because then they're going to trust you, right, and they're going to understand better, and they're actually much more likely to comply if they feel like they've been given a say or taken part. Now, of course, a lot of the things are already going to be in place, but they might have good ideas, or they might it might just clarify their understanding about some of the things that are already in place. Mm-hmm. If you sit and have that discussion about sort of new rules, really. I know when I was teaching, one of the first things I ever did at the start of the year, this was with small children, sort of 5 and 6 year olds, is we'd sit and they'd decide on the classroom rules every year. So they set the rules for the classroom. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, they were pretty much the same every year, because they know what a good classroom should look like. But I just think it gives the children a sense of control. And if the children and the staff feel in control, then they're less likely to be anxious, which is what you were just sort of saying about the staff. But I just think that can be put to the children too.
Well, that's right. I mean, a sense of control or confidence and anxiety are like two ends of the seesaw. So mm-hmm. when you feel confident about something, or you feel you've got some control over something, then your anxiety levels are going to be less. And of course, the other way around. So
yeah. And I think from a parent point of view as well, you can be doing this at home, and about that visualization. If you're talking about all the things you're worried about, then your child is going to be imagining the worst case scenarios just like you are. And you can kind of combat that a little bit about talking about all the things that they are to look forward to, about speaking to them about what school might look like. What are the positives? What are they looking forward to? Yes, you're going to be able to see your friends. It might not be quite the same. What do you think it's going to be like? And, you know, talk them through that and almost build their imagination for them so that they're clear about what's going to happen, but also they're feeling positive about it and they've got things to look forward to. Because it's not just, you know, I think a lot of people's negative imagination is kicked in about going back to work or going back to school or the easing of lockdown in general. And I don't think it reflects the reality of what's actually happening. So be clear, and if you're not sure, if you know that your imagination's running away with you, just question, have I got it right? Is this accurate? Is what I'm imagining accurate? Where does it say that? Where have I got that information from? Is it fact, or is it something that has just popped into my head, or is it something that I've read on Facebook? So be clear and look at evidence and just check that what you imagine is in perspective as well.
Yeah, and as you mentioned the word perspective there, perspective's a really interesting thing. I won't do it again because I've done it twice with the glass. Perspective becomes a reality, and it becomes our reality, but it doesn't necessarily mean, as you said, Abby, that it's the truth or it's real. It's just what we start to think, and the more we start to think that, the more we start to think that, and the greater the sort of effects that has. Now, I know that we have a lot of people that have said they're quite anxious and quite nervous, and there's been a lot of stuff about mental well-being and mental health in the papers and on TV, etc. And of course, one thing that sort of struck me the other day, in fact, it was somebody they know about, they maybe should find help. How do they go about it? What do they do? I could go to the doctor, but I'm not sick, or they've got too much to do because of the situation, or if I go, it's going to, it'll be a year before I'm seen, all of these things. Now, that may or may not be true, because things will be different in different areas. You're a practicing therapist. I mean, what can people do to say get in touch with you? How do people get in touch with you?
I think first of all, what you're saying about imagination is important here as well, because I think what people imagine therapy to be like is not very accurate these days. I think we sort of imagine sort of lying on a chaise longue or a couch, pouring our heart out, talking about our past and crying and all that kind of thing. And, you know, that's not the reality of a lot of therapies these days. And there's so many different kinds of therapy out there, and so many different kind of treatments or courses or help, that the key is finding the right one. It's about doing your research and asking. I think actually the most difficult thing to do for a lot of people is to ask, because they either think that their feelings aren't that important, or they're just going to go on their way on their own. They don't want people to judge them or to be labelled as having an illness or be mentally unwell. I think there's still a very big stigma around mental health. But the reality is actually that everybody has mental health, just like everybody has physical health. If you were physically unwell, even if that was just a twisted ankle or a bit of a headache, you would go and get help with that. That doesn't mean that there's anything seriously wrong with you. And mental health is the same. You can have great mental health. You can have fluctuating mental health. It can be good sometimes and not so good other times. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a catastrophe. So I think the first thing is to just speak to somebody and just find out what help could look like for you. Now, whether that's speaking to you or me, or exploring the internet a bit, or, you know, seeing your GP, that's a choice you've got to make. But a lot of people as well, their first port of call is the GP.
Yeah.
Now, you know, GPs try to be very helpful and, you know, a lot of very understanding and empathetic, but a lot of GPs also are not trained in mental health, and their options for helping you are quite limited with either medication, or they refer you usually to a CBT therapist. Now, a lot of the people that I see have already been through that process. So they've been on medication, or they've been to some other kind of therapy, and they've said, well, that's, that hasn't worked. So why would coming to me be any different? But some people won't make that step. They'll just think, well, I've tried that. It didn't work. I must be broken. There's no point trying anything else. And that's not the case. It's just a case of finding something else that does work for you. So, the job that I do, it's not about sitting on the couch. It's not about talking about your past or talking about your feelings or anything like that. It's more of a training course, actually. I teach people why they think the way that they do, sort of how those thinking habits have developed, where they've come from, where they're helpful, where they're not, and how to change those thinking habits. So it's almost like a six or seven lessons really about how your brain works and how that might be impacting your life and how to change it for the better. So it's quite motivational. It'd be a bit like going to see a personal trainer at the gym for your physical health. That's kind of what I like to think I would do for somebody's mental health. It's about motivating you and teaching you the exercises that you need to do to get your mental health in shape. So it's actually a quite enjoyable process and interesting, because you learn a lot about yourself. And my aim is to send people out feeling great, not to send them out crying and feeling terrible. I don't want to do that. That's not what I do. So definitely look at different kinds of help. So I don't know how your what you do, Andrew, differs from what I do, for example, because there'll be differences even there, won't there?
Well, there are differences, but by and large, we're very similar in our approach. We both want people to go out happy, feeling better about themselves, and not being sitting there crying and so on. It is interesting that when you mentioned about the going to the doctor and might get medications, and it suddenly occurred to me that very often when you do go to the doctor, and as you say, they can be very useful, but not necessarily trained in mental well-being, is they might give you a tablet, some drug or other, but it doesn't necessarily work for you, so they try another one and they give you another one. And that's often the case, that some people do things like they might go to counselling, or they might go to psychotherapy, they might go to hypnotherapy, they might go to all sorts of whatever it is, and something will just click with them. But I know what you do and what I do and Sharon and Caroline do. It's actually relatively quick compared to some of the therapies that are around. Because I know sometimes that some therapies are seen upon that you need years to do it. And like you said, it could be up to 6 or 7 sessions with you. Well, in the world of therapy, that's pretty swift. And I'm similar as well. In effect, what somebody has to do, how easy is it? Well, if you're watching this, obviously you can go and look at the replay, and our details are there if you want to get in touch and ask us a question or take things further. But you can just go online, you can Google somebody in your area if you want to go in your area, and you can go and see them. And it's just as easy as sending an email or picking up the phone from a practical point of view. But as you say, some people sort of get a bit stuck. It's not for me. I can't do that. I've tried that.
I think some people feel like they're failing by asking for help as well. Like they're letting themselves down because they can't manage themselves. And the tragedy is that people take their own lives, or they feel completely hopeless or total despair, but they don't want to ask for help because they think either that they can't be helped, it's too bad, or they don't want to bring up those feelings or memories or whatever it is. And you don't need to do that. And I think by speaking to the right person and getting the right help, you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. I think it's just something that what have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? I think is the biggest point, because, you know, if that help works, think about how different your life could be.
Yeah.
And if you speak to somebody and you think, actually, that's not for me, that's fine. You haven't lost anything by doing that. Even if you go for a free consultation or even a couple of sessions with somebody and you think this isn't for me, that's fine. That still doesn't have to be the end. It's just finding the right thing for you. So yeah, if you are struggling, just ask somebody for help, whether that be you, me, picking up the phone, going to the doctor, whatever that help is. The first step is to just ask and find out a bit more. You don't have to do anything about it if you don't want to, but just ask.
Yeah. And that's empowering in itself, that just asking, because you feel you've done something, you feel more confident about that, though it can be difficult. And another thing that I suppose historically that might have stopped people from looking for help is this sense of, well, if I'm feeling low, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling upset, or I have panic attacks, I must be weak. I must have a weak personality. I must have a weak character, something like that. That's complete nonsense. Nothing at all is like that. You're not weak.
Or that's just who I am. That's just who I am. That's the other one that I hear a lot. Like, you know, it's just who I am. It's part of me. That's not changeable. That's not true either.
Yeah, and following on from that, some people that I know and I've seen say, well, my mum was like that, or my dad was like that, and my granddad or my grandmum was like that, and so on. Well, just because that has happened in the past, you don't, people automatically sort of assume that it's some sort of genetic thing. Well, 99 times out of 100, it's not. We talked earlier about the children picking up on the anxiety of the parents. Well, that's, to put it in a very basic nutshell, that's roughly what happens. So it's not weak. It's not just because how we are. Get in touch with somebody, take it from there and see how that works. The other point is that a lot of people don't realize, I think, is that the way we feel, the way we think about things, our sort of psychological well-being, is that has a real physical effect on our bodies. It has a real physical effect on our bodies, the way that we think, far more so than most people give credit for. But if you're feeling not so good, sort of mental well-being area, and that's anything basically, that can also affect you physically. So you're doing yourself a lot of good by just getting in touch.
And going back to children as well, you know, children that are struggling, a lot of the time, one of the first things that you will notice is that they get tummy aches, they feel sick, they've got a headache, you know, their physical symptoms kick in quite a lot. And the support is there for children as well. But a lot of the time, especially with young children, I work with parents and not necessarily the child at all, because if you can get the parent to understand how their brain works and where thoughts come from and that kind of thing, that helps them to understand their children's thinking as well, so they can help their child without their child even needing to get help, although obviously help is there as well. Same thing for schools as well. I know that you and I, Andrew, both go into schools and do training, and we work with teachers to teach them about mental health and where these issues come from. Because if you've got teachers that really understand mental well-being, emotional intelligence, thinking processes, they can identify unhelpful thinking patterns in children and work on those before a problem even occurs. You can kind of teach good thinking habits before anxiety kicks in, or before you've got children that are really struggling. So and the same with businesses, you know, you want to be practicing and promoting good mental health and well-being, rather than just waiting for people to be really struggling that need fixing. So if you're a teacher and you've got a school that want to find out more about training your staff, or you've got children that need support, again, it's about asking for that help. It is there. Get in touch with us. We're happy to come into schools and talk to staff or leaders or business leaders as well.
Yeah, and another thing that a lot of people wouldn't directly associate with mental well-being in the business sense is productivity and profit. Because if you have a workforce that is high in their mental well-being, then the research shows that there's much more productivity. People buy into the company, they feel part of it, a bit like we were talking about earlier with going back to the schools, but feel part of it, and therefore more money is generated, etc., etc. So mental well-being is not just a nice thing that we think should happen. It's actually got a lot of, certainly in the business world, a lot of hard edges to it in terms of pounds and pence.
Well, the same with schools and pupil productivity and motivation to work and exam results and things like that. And it's utterly predictable as well. If you've got well-motivated pupils or staff, they're going to want to put the effort in because they feel that they've got some control over their outcomes. And that's, if you can learn to generate that, that'll look great across your business or school. You've got children and staff that want to be there, that are working hard. Who doesn't want that? Yeah,
that's good. I think we'll maybe round up just now and just say that obviously we talked about the children go back to school now. In some parts they've already gone back, etc. And in other parts of England and also in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, schools are starting at different times over the next couple of months. So that there may well be anxiety, but most children, to use that, it's a bit of a cliche, I suppose, that children are resilient, but actually they are, and they effectively get on with it. And so it's just, if you're a parent and you're worried about things, just think maybe a bit about how you express that to your children.
And also don't presume that your child feels or thinks the same things that you do. They might be really looking forward to going back to school while you've got all these worries about them going back, or you don't think they can cope. They might not feel the same way. Mm-hmm. So talk to them about it, but do that in a really helpful way. So don't pass on your worries, almost play it down a little bit, talk about what they're looking forward to, plan things going well, get them to use their imagination. So it's empowering them to feel in control. And not being presumptuous, and making sure that you've got all the facts as well.
That's it. And also, if you are feeling anxious or you're having a bit of a difficult time or something like that, just ask for help. Wherever you go, just ask for it, because everybody you see will be wanting to help. And I think you can see from the sessions that we have that neither Abby nor myself are particularly scary. So do please ask for help. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, thank you, bye.